montage.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's why it flows so easily, strangely. I mean, normally that'd be a pejorative. It's like, oh, it feels like a montage. It feels like a music video. But that kind of works in its benefit because it's so loose with time.
Well, yeah. Well, he establishes that the movie is going to, like, just move from, like, incident to incident, like, very freely. So that just allows him to play fast and loose with the editing.
Yeah. And that works.
Completely works.
My grandma was saying, oh, this is the only scene I don't watch where he shoots Spider. Spider do.
Poor Spider. Just a heads up for the next episode, I'll have some fun things to talk about. I've been rewatching the Harry Potter movies with Daniel because he hasn't seen any of them. So
any of them?
He hasn't seen any of them. He hasn't read the books and he hadn't seen any of the movies until recently.
Even more uncultured than I.
Yes, precisely. So I think we're gonna watch Prisoner of Azkaban tonight. So.
Let's see. You still hold the sixth one as? I think. Which one do you hold as the best?
I don't know. I'm kind of, I'm using this opportunity to reevaluate them because there's a bunch of them I haven't watched in a while. I think I usually say that the sixth one is my favorite. I generally also think it's the best.
Yeah, as far as, like, out of all the ones, I think I've only seen, like, 1, 2, 3, and, because I'm a fuck, 6. Which is not unlike how I've read the books,
well,
to be honest.
If I remember correctly, 4 and 5 are, like, bad, so...
Yeah, like, everyone said that is not on anyone's, like, top 3 Harry Potter films list.
A lot of people like the 4th one, and I don't know why.
Interesting. And then, like, 7 is sort of... 7 no one really talks about, like, as, like, the complete one-part experience. No one really talks about that other than, like, how it was just ruinous for franchise films after that.
Well, yeah, but that is kind of a shame because I think for the Harry Potter movies it actually kind of worked.
And from what I hear, Part 7, Part 1 is kind of a neat franchise experiment.
You might like it. I think 7 Part 1 is great.
Everyone I think I hear, like, okay, so we're getting rid of all the wizard stuff. We're kind of just having people hanging around in a wood, telling stories, going nuts. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's not all that, but a decent chunk of it is that, and that's about the best you could hope for. And then Part 2 is just kind of all climax all the time, and I have not watched that one all the way through in quite a while.
With those kind of things, you just kind of skip to the end, see what happens, and check out.
Well, not me, because I did it the right way, but well, that movie does have one transcendent sequence, which is the scene where you basically see all of Snape's backstory, and that is transcendent. Alan Rickman is superb in that.
It's a tragedy he's gone.
He's been the big re-revelation of the first 2 movies. Other than that, they're not quite as bad as you remember.
Well, the first 2 movies, like, I mean, from what I've seen of them, like, they are like kids movies.
Yes.
Proper, full-blooded kids movies, more so than any of the others.
Definitely, that is definitely true.
And that's okay.
That's very okay. The first 2 are definitely more children's books than the rest of the books, so they were adapting the spirit, and they did it pretty well. I thought they're good. I don't want to get too deep into this because I did want to talk about it on the show, but welcome to another Hack Fraud Extra. This week, so allow me to introduce this just a little bit. So you may recall on our last episode, John and I got into it a little bit about David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin's The Social Network. Which is my favorite movie.
That would have never happened. I didn't predict that at all.
And perhaps this was my fault for not coming in with a counter argument ready to go. But listen, I was never on the debate team or anything. I don't do very well coming up with an argument on the spot. So I asked John, would you mind re-litigating The Social Network and giving me time to prepare a case?
This is round 2, and, like, one thing this is interesting because I don't think this has ever happened you sent me the Social Network script. And I read some of it just to go, like, okay, what is in this thing? Because, like, it's kind of like, I often get in trouble for, like we are very auteur-driven, this podcast is.
Sure.
Like, we kind of hinge a lot on the director, even when that's probably not deserved all the time. That's just a habit of us. That's also a habit of our largest influence, the Vidiots.
Yes, it's a habit of the film critical community in general, and one that's perhaps become a bit of a problem that may require
maybe
addressing.
Maybe we're all just secret autocrats, who knows?
Well, who knows?
So yeah, I think I made, looking back, I think I put a little bit too much blame on David Fincher. And I think I am I've thought a lot about, like, your idea of, like, the Social Network as an accidental masterpiece, because I think that's, like, a really fascinating idea of, like, a film that is, like, unintentionally goes in all the right places, and like, and I was kind of thinking about, like, how that works, and I did have a really concise summation of that, but I forgot it. So hopefully I remember that throughout the course of this, and this will either become like a bitter tit for tat about, like, a filmmaker we disagree about, or, like, a genuinely compelling conversation about the nature of filmmaking and screenwriting.
Well, let's hope it's the latter. But, well, no, because my plan here is not to, like, go point by point your argument and refute every bit of it. I don't want to do that.
I studied your argument. I listened to the podcast 6 times to get all your points in a row, and I will destroy you, John Slapnick.
No, that's not what this is. I do. There are a couple points. No, that would be unfair. There are a couple points you made, specific points you made that I do want to address and will address, but mainly this is about me trying to make a better case for a movie that is both my favorite movie and a movie that I think is great. And I guess I'll start with that, which is that I didn't draw a very clear line last week between why it's my favorite movie and why I think it's great. I mean, there
paper real quick. I want to get this down.
Okay.
There's a pen. Where's the paper? Perfect. I have acquired paper and stolen a financial handbook to put it on.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So first, I just want to... Okay. So there isn't a lot of overlap there. I mean, a lot of the reasons I think it's great are the reasons why I like it. That is, that's just a natural kind of thing. But I don't say it's a perfect movie. There are a lot of movies that I like that I think are perfect. Well, not a lot, but, several. And...
select few, and I feel the same way, but there are some movies where I do believe they are perfect.
Yeah. And this is not one of them. It's not perfect. It is, however, I think a great movie, one of the best movies of the 21st century, at least so far. And it's my favorite movie, at least in part just because it was the movie that, like, maybe more than any other, like, helped to form my style of screenwriting. Like, when I experienced Sorkin's dialogue for the first time, that was such a revelation to me, and I think I discussed this briefly in the last episode, but, reading that script was such a rush for me. Like, I learned how to write scripts by reading other scripts, and that was, like, one of the, not the first one I read, but among the first ones I read, and compared to, like, James Cameron's Avatar script, which was kind of where I learned basic screenplay formatting from. This one was just kind of a breath of fresh air. Like,
I think I know where you're coming from. This is the movie that made you say screenwriting.
Yeah.
It was one of the first movies that you watch where you really notice the screenwriter, and the screenwriter has a defined presence.
Yes.
I think, I guess a similar experience for me would be, like, watching, like, Citizen Kane for the first time, or, like, just getting into Wells in general, and just seeing, like, such a defined authorial presence in those movies, and just being just awed by it. Yeah,
it's very similar to that. And, besides even the dialogue, like, if you read the screenplay, it's just peppered with, like, great little just what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't know, peccadillos or
set up and payoff.
no, not just that. No, like little things, like in like the stage directions, he'll like put little things and little like descriptions and whatnot. Like one of my favorite ones that like has stuck with me forever is where that scene in the Final Club where Zuckerberg is talking to Divya and the Winklevi, and they're talking about like how he invented that app for an MP3 player that recognizes your taste in music. He's like, anybody try to buy it? Microsoft. Yeah, how much? I didn't sell it. I uploaded it for free. And he's like, why? And the stage direction says, Mark gives a shrug that says, I don't know, and fuck you at the same time. And
You know what happened? Jesse Eisenberg pulled that off flawlessly.
I love that. I love things like that, and that has had a profound influence on the way that I write scripts. So that was just a huge part of it. It was just such a revelatory experience for me, but it's also a great movie, and I truly think that. And I know that you have your issues with David Fincher. That is perfectly fine.
Oh, do I?
No, you don't. Whoever said that? What evidence is there to support that? No. But I don't share all your issues with Fincher. Certainly, you are viscerally angered by him in a way that I've never quite understood. But
yeah, I'm gonna try and get into that. Like, what about him gets? Like, I'm actually not even too sure myself. To be honest, like, why I become so viscerally angry. Like, I get why I'm like angry at him on like a subconscious level, but just like why like I want to kill all movies when I see that style, and when I see like video essays about him, even from like people I love, like Every Frame of Painting. I just want to strangle them. Like, I don't know why I get so angry.
I think certainly maybe there are people in the critical community, maybe quite a few people, who maybe ascribe a lot more brilliance to him than he deserves. I would never qualify him as like a great auteur. He's not, one of these people like Scorsese or Wes Anderson or the Coen brothers who just brings, so much, to every project. He's not an auteur. But the main reason The Social Network works so well is that script was, I think, it's by far the strongest material he's ever worked with.
Oh yeah,
and,
I'll give you that.
And
that's my part.
The material was all there in the screenplay for him to take that screenplay and, could a more, auteurist director have made a greater movie, brought more to the filmmaking of it? Maybe, but also maybe not. Because, Sorkin's voice is so clearly defined, and, I'm gonna sound like I'm just totally insulting Fincher here. Obviously, you don't have a problem with that, but, like, Sorkin's style is so defined, and the screenplay is so a product of his voice, that taking Fincher's style, which is really, I do agree with you. I think his style is pretty minimal. He doesn't bring a whole lot to the table, other than, I think, like, casting and directing the actors. I think he's actually quite good at.
Well, he does like 50 fucking takes in every goddamn scene. So, like, if the acting isn't good, like, I think he was legitimately insane.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, but that aside, he brings those elements. I think this movie is perfectly cast. I think every actor is perfectly suited to the role that they have. I think it's pretty much impeccable.
I have some issues of Andrew Garfield, but like you're right. Like Armie Hammer, perfect. Jesse Eisenberg, perfect. Like even like the extras just seem to glow.
Yeah, and even like Justin Timberlake, he's never been better than he is in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
He's just so incredible. But
did you see? I think it was called In Time.
Yeah.
You were in the class.
Boy, that movie is not good. Okay, we're getting off topic here.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so with this such a rich and textured screenplay, Fincher brings his his style of like impeccably framing each shot so it looks like fucking awesome, and his kind of kinetic style of editing where he'll just cut from angle to angle. And I watched a video essay about this movie from a channel called Movies I Love and So Can You, so I can't claim credit for this, but on the West Wing, the way, because Sorkin scripts are like all dialogue, they're just
it's just
pages
like,
and pages and pages of
it's just like answer response.
Yeah.
It's just like the witty one-liner just flying across the room, setups, payoffs.
Right.
It is just like almost like a stream of consciousness kind of writing.
And as good as Sorkin is, not every scene can be so brilliant that you can sustain the cinematicness of it just by your regular old shot reverse shot. It works quite well in the opening scene of The Social Network because that scene is just so brilliant, but you need something to propel the dialogue, to make the staging interesting. And The West Wing did this with the walk and talk. That's a very famous, technique to kind of...
And that comes back in things
bring propulsiveness to it.
I mean, I think it comes up like twice in A Few Good Men.
Yeah. So that's something you can find throughout, movies written by Sorkin. But Fincher does something very different, which is that he has mostly static shots, but he'll cut just rapidly from angle to angle, and that really does help propel the movie. It does, and he's good at staging, he's good at blocking, he knows how to I think he is pretty good at finding a good place to put the camera and kind of stage the scene in such a way that it's interesting. These are not maybe the most impressive skills that a filmmaker can have, but they are important skills and not to be underrated, I think. So the mere fact of that, what stylistic elements he brings to the movie, and look, you have your issues with, the look of the movie, whatever. I think it looks great. The Fincher style maybe doesn't work for everything. I don't know. I think it works good here. He has a way of framing shots and maybe just color correcting shots that they look really good. And I don't
mind that there's a heavy amount of color correction. I just mind why is everything piss yellow?
That I just
though I am curious, what about that sort of piss yellow? I use that term because that's all I can think of. Dungeon lighting style. What about that really brings out this material for you?
Well, it just doesn't bother me. I mean, and when I saw this movie for the first time, I'd never seen a David Fincher movie before, so that was very new to me. I mean, if you watch his other movies, it can just be kind of an overload on that, but this movie is so propelled by the screenplay that it almost doesn't matter. But I think that Fincher has a kind of a naturally industrial sense, and I think that works for a movie about the blossoming of the tech industry, and I think that fits it quite well. And I think based on the points you made last time, you maybe think it was a little too over dramatic or over ominous. I don't know that I ever got that feel, but I would also think that I think from the beginning of this movie, you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. You sense that some kind of big explosion of the tension that is going to build up through the entire movie is going to burst out at some point. And I don't know that
I will say the dropping of the shoe, which is I think I'd argue is Eduardo charging down the hall, and throwing the MacBook in half. Fucking perfect.
Yeah.
A fucking perfect scene.
Yeah, that's all great. And I think that all works. So that's kind of my opening case. If you want to lay out your gripes with, the Fincher style, now maybe would be a good time.
Well, what about Fincher, pisses me off to such, an internal degree? And, I think I made it, sound here's the thing about, when there's, movies I don't love, and I'm, kind of, really lukewarm on, or, really divided on, I feel my criticisms of them just completely overpower, what good points I have. Anything that comes out of my mouth just sounds like damning with fine praise, which is just something, which is a problem with my critical voice. But I don't hate this movie. I think there are moments of brilliance in it. I think it does have this is the movie that makes me like, wow, like Fincher unrestrained can be an arresting thing.
Mm.
And I think, like, I remember, like, rewatching some of, like, I watched the Captain Christian video, and, like, I had heard of him, I just, when you said Captain Christian, that spelling just didn't materialize in my mind.
Oh, okay.
And he does have a great editing style, but I watched, the one I think I'm going to use the most is the Every Form of Painting one, where he says, like, how he makes, like, editing cinematic, and, like, he pretty much, like, I think he uses, like, 7 as a reference point, and how he's, like, cutting to everything.
Yeah.
And I just think that, like, you know, sometimes, like, we could really use just to clamp things down, just, like, really focus on, like, one guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there was a moment in, like, the boardroom scene where, like, Mark Zuckerberg turns around, looks bored near the camera, and says, "It's raining." And Fincher, of course, we cut to the rain. Because of course you cut to the rain. I mean, that's what he's looking at. But, like, what happens when you just stay on his face? I don't fucking care that it's raining. That's not the fucking point of him turning around and saying, "Oh, look, it's raining."
I will grant you, yes, there are, like, strange things like that. That's why I say perhaps this is not a perfect movie.
And yeah, and there are things like, at one point, he, like, cuts to the typist while there's, like, verbal bombardment going around. There's kind of, like, a moment that is, like, not nearly as egregious as, like, the J.J. Abrams, like, Start Into Darkness thing, but, like, the Winklevi aren't talking, but he's constantly cutting to them as if, like, he wants to insert them into, like, this power dynamic, which works far better in The Social Network than it does in Into Darkness, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of like, just get me on Zuckerberg. Just get me on Zuckerberg. I do believe, like, for, like, these conversation scenes, just, like, really, like, pick out, like, who are our power players? Who is really important in the scene? And keep on them. Like, I don't need, like, to see, like, everyone. I think, like, the dialogue itself is so kinetic that, like, I don't need to, like, see, like, every angle, every person, every reaction shot. I think what you can just do is just, like, plant the camera down on, like, and sometimes they do this, is just, like, Mark Zuckerberg just, like, laying into someone. And that's just, and it's a shock to the system because we finally stopped cutting to every single face in the room.
Well, that's fair. That's a fair criticism of, you know, his filmmaking technique. Okay, so fair.
And the thing about the color scheme is that, like, I do just think that, like, I wish there was just more of a build, maybe. Like, I think, like, the visual style, like, sometimes it's done, when we're ever at Harvard, it's all dungeon lighting, but, like, when we go to California, and, like, that scene of them in the pool is just such a blinding moment for the eyes because, oh, blue sky! There's full Technicolor! Look at this!
Yeah, well, it's also just harder to control the lighting so exactly when you're shooting exteriors.
Oh, yeah, but, like, and of course, like, this is all, like, unintentional stuff. I just do think that, like, if you're going to go, like, ominous, I'm not going to say ominous for cool again, but this sort of, like, ominous, we are waiting for the other shoe to drop, I kind of want there to be a build to that. I kind of want there to be, like, this classic, like, sort of, like, it starts off as something as small as, like, he made a website about ranking girls, and it crashed the Harvard site. That's, like, kind of the thing you, like, see in, like, a joke newspaper. And, like, I feel like that should start off as, like, maybe not, like, quite, like, oh, like, Animal House style antics, but more of a lighthearted touch, and, like, as, like, the Zuckerberg just dives deeper and deeper in the megalomania, and, like, the world and the stakes around him get darker and darker. Like, what if, like, the world around him just started getting darker, and we kind of transfer from, like, these, like, innocent, these sort of, like, beginning innocent days, because you forget, like, isn't the movie begin on his freshman year of college?
I think it's his sophomore year.
It's his sophomore year, so, like, he's really fucking young and really fucking naive, and if anything, it's like, this is also a story about a loss of innocence.
Sure, definitely.
And I think, like, to have, like, that sort of yellow dungeon lighting the entire time, I think just sort of is, like, I think that's just the wrong choice to make. I think that just, like, it, to be, like, at, like, a visual 11 the entire time just sort of kind of exhausts you.
Well, I'm not going to defend. I'm not going to like waste too much breath defending that because I don't really think it needs defending because it never bothered me. I think that's just an aesthetic thing that you have that never really affected me. Like, I never really got an ominous feeling from most of the movie. Like, as many times as I watched it, you know, I could see if you get that feeling, like it's me, I can kind of try to justify it, but I've never felt that way about the movie.
Like, it doesn't work for me because I get like ominous visuals, but it's constantly joke after joke after Sorkin joke.
Okay, well,
and that's just like genuine like cognitive dissonance, and like I think like I go back to like the opening scene where like. After reading the script, I'm now like utterly convinced that this was a joke. This was definitely intended as a joke, where like Zuckerberg calls in Eduardo and says like, "Hey, I'm doing some really stupid infantile thing. Can I have your magical code?" and we just kind of cut to Eduardo like going, wait, what? And then we just cut away to like him writing it on the window. But like with Fincher, it's all dark lit, and we're peering through the window and zooming in, and like the kind of joke of it is kind of just lost in that for me. So like decent, cool shot, I guess, between the window. Cool shot, I guess.
That's just I don't know that. I don't know why. That's just something that's like never really bothered me about the movie. I guess I can understand where you're coming from. I definitely understand that you think, you know, a better choice would be, and certainly it probably would have been, to develop a visual palette that was maybe a little better suited to the material. Okay, fine. I
do believe like this is just and this I think just goes beyond like my general. Though it's certainly rooted in it, like my general issue with the Fincher style, like I do believe there is a genuine cognitive dissonance between like what we are seeing and what we are hearing.
Okay.
I was just watching the movie like, this is the weirdest thing sometimes.
All right, that's a fair criticism. That is one that I do not share because I've never felt that. But fair. All right.
Granted, I'm also a brick wall who doesn't laugh at movies, so take it that what you will. I am not going to say, like, I am going to fully admit, like, a lot of my some of the issues with the movie do, like, have, like, root in, like, personal beliefs. Like, I think, like, just, like, the very nature of it being in this corporate world makes me just feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just despise this corporate world. And, like, the movie, and this is something I'm going to say, because you kind of said that, like, we are going into the world of these people, of these misogynists, these narcissists, these like backstabbers.
Uh-huh.
I get that. Like I know. I get the feeling like there's kind of like that. And like that defense. I would use that defense for something like say like Goodfellas or A Clockwork Orange or something like that. It's bringing us into the world rather than like genuinely misogynist or rapist or whatever the fuck A Clockwork Orange could be.
Yeah.
The issue is that like the Fincher style is naturally distant, and I mean I can make like hollow Kubrick analogies with that, but like you have to remember like Kubrick would break that sometimes. Kubrick would sometimes just get us like a goofy low angle shot of someone just screaming into the camera. And like would just go like hog. Like I think there's like the scene where like Alex gets beaten up, and we get shots of like close up handheld shots of all the people beating him up. And I think there's not a single thing like that in the movie. We just get like these like distant medium close ups and medium wides. Like we very rarely like go into. I think like the only examples I can think of are like the tilt shift stuff at the rowing competition.
Well, if I can make a point here,
sure.
I think, and this is a problem with the movie that I will definitely acknowledge. You know, Kubrick, I think a lot of the time you can really feel his contempt for the characters in his filmmaking.
And that's true in Scorsese's stuff too.
Yeah. Fincher, you don't really get that. It's very difficult to tell like how he feels about the characters in any of his movies. Yeah. That is why he is a lesser filmmaker than your Scorsese or your Kubrick. Fine, I will admit that.
Okay.
It's and a problem that I will admit with The Social Network is that it sometimes kind of leads toward like an objectivity, like almost to a fault. Like it I do
Yeah.
think a point of the movie is to kind of like leave it up to the viewer to kind of make their own decision how they feel about the characters. And I do think that is effective in a certain way. I think it maybe is not as effective as maybe making a judgment about the characters could have been, because like even like I did feel this way like the first time I watched it. I kind of walked away from it like not really knowing what to think. But I do appreciate kind of its commitment to, and again, maybe this is another thing that happened by accident, but I appreciate the commitment that seems to be present in the movie to not making a judgment on the characters and kind of leaving you to make up your own mind about like what you think about these people.
I don't know. Like, I don't get like I don't think there's like a shred of sympathy with the Mark Zuckerberg character.
No, there's no sympathy, but there's no like openly condemning him either, which you could maybe read as problematic. Because
I think, like, the only character slightly like that is Erica, and I think what does she have? Like 2 scenes, and we see her through and on a picture in the ending.
Yeah, but I think there's a point to that. I think that you know her like kind of lack of presence, you know, like, but even the point is like they bring her back at key moments. The moments when she does come back are really kind of, you really feel the whole weight of that. At least I do. You know, you bring her back like right after he's gotten like some big initial popularity with the Facebook, and you know, and she's like, I don't know what this is. I don't give a fuck. Like, you called me a bitch on the internet. Like, you did something terrible, and you're refusing to apologize for it. And that just kind of spurs him to be like, we have to expand. We have to keep this thing going. Like,
I just think we need to punctuate this like this bubble that this movie has, like this like intentionally like awful bubble of people. I do think we just need more people like just poking into it, and like I do think like we do need like a character, maybe not like a pointedly saying you people are awful, but sort of like at the very least like bringing like a hey, why are you guys so brutal?
But, and here's my counterpoint.
Okay.
No one in the real world has done that. Facebook is massively successful. Facebook is huge. Mark Zuckerberg is as successful as he ever wanted to be. And in the movie, like, he just, you know, you see him just riding right to the top, and you know, no one is there to stop him, to criticize him, to be like, hey, what are you doing? And at the end of the movie, he's completely alone. He's left alone in the boardroom trying to get a Facebook friend request accepted by this girl who he was horrible to years ago. That is, like, you know, I don't want to say heartbreaking because he treated her like shit, but, you know, there's something really kind of poignant and like deeply, darkly ironic about that. And I love that.
I surrender. I'll give you that. Like, you real world history as thematic subtext is one of my favorite things in the world. I bow down to you, my master.
I got one.
I'll give you that. Do you have like any like final points on like the Fincher style? Because I think like I'm just kind of tired talking about it at this point. Whereas like I think like his style is like too distant, too monolithic to really achieve anything. Like, it's a like cinematic look, and like it achieves all the things we'd say film school filmmaking needs to achieve, but like there's rare, like with some exceptions, there's like rarely there's really transcendent filmmaking from him. There's rarely a sense that he's like elevating material, and there's often a sense that like he's not honestly quite sure what his style does. It's just a style, and like he thinks it's cool.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't know if, I think the sheer amount we're using the word cool here is a bit misleading. I don't know how cool he thinks it is. I don't know. He doesn't strike me as like a frat guy.
That's what I think when I watch Fincher.
Okay.
That's why I'm going back.
All right, that's fair. I'm certainly he probably thinks it looks good. I don't know. My only point with that is, like, I do agree with you to a certain degree on it, and like I say, that's why I don't think The Social Network is a perfect movie and could maybe potentially have been better, because he does not elevate the material. You're right. But I think he was a good match for it to bring it to the screen in an interesting and engaging way. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
That's perfectly fine. I don't know. I guess I kind of want to move on to, like, the Sorkin at this point, because I did
Okay.
read like tiny fragments of the script. Most particularly, like, there was a moment. I think it was like the first time we flash forward to like him in the boardroom with the judges and all the former people he fucked over.
Yeah.
And there's a point where, like, this is one of the Sorkin notes in that, like, this is a different Mark Zuckerberg, just as tortured, but more sure of himself, more confident with himself. And Sorkin's way of showing that is just having it so Mark Zuckerberg just gives a bunch of smart-ass one-liners. That's like his like default way of showing that, and like one-liners are fun. One-liners are funny, but I don't really get that much change out of him. Like, I think like throughout like the entire movie, there's never a scene where I don't think that like Mark Zuckerberg is utterly in love with himself.
Well, I don't know if that's the point. I don't think that's what is supposed to come across. And also, like, that I think is mainly a note, like, you know, for the performance. I think that stuff is mainly supposed to kind of come across in the performance and the performing style, which I think it does. Like, the way he kind of, you know, reacts. And also, like, the scenes with the Winklevoss twins, I think, is where that really comes across, is because, you know, he is just smarmy and, like, not just one-liners. He's, like, very, you know, aggressive towards them in a way that he's not in, you know, the scenes, like, when he, like, first meets them. You know, his technique for, you know, kind of skirting them before is, like, just to kind of avoid them completely, like, dodging their emails and whatnot. And
which is something that's kind of prescient, is like a purely like digital relationship.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Yeah, and then in the courtroom, you see he's like full, like he doesn't give a fuck anymore. Like he is laying into them with all his might, and he really just does not care like what they think about him anymore. Like when he first meets them, he like really cares about their opinion, and you can kind of tell, or at least for a little while. I think like in the let me rephrase that. When he like the like in the instant, in like the moment that he meets them, like you can tell he's kind of in awe. And then like when they bring him into the porcelain and he like kind of converses with them, you can see his kind of respect and like admiration for them like just kind of ebbing away. And
I don't think he ever has. I'll agree with that to a certain extent. I don't think he ever respects them.
Okay.
He respects what they mean.
That's fair. That's fair.
They're like, there is kind of like some like autocratic navel gazing about like I need rank, I must outrank them, and like there's like one of the ideas that's kind of pulsating through this movie, and I'm not sure about how intentional it is, especially with how much like how horrible like the corporate culture of Zuckerberg is shown to be. Like there is kind of like a hatred for the old guard and old money, and like these old fucks have to die, and like the Winklevi are just like the ultimate like distillation of that.
Yeah.
And like I'm also like, well, guys, like the alternative you're giving isn't any better. If anything, it might be worse.
Yeah, but that's the whole point of it.
Yes, and that's where I kind of think it becomes like the accidental masterpiece where you're describing, because I'm not quite sure Aaron Sorkin intended for like it to be like this corporate culture and the old world is bad. What is replacing it might be even worse.
Well, because Zuckerberg is the type of character that Sorkin would usually like and empathize with. He is an idealistic person who like wants to change the world, but Sorkin is deeply, deeply cynical about the internet and about technology. And so he is able to, whether it's by accident or whether it's on purpose, I don't know, it ends up this way. It is presented in such a way that it comes across as like these are like horrible people doing horrible things to each other. And that is in no way a good thing, replacing the kind of old guard that they're trying to phase out.
Yeah, and that's sort of something like that was an issue I did have, but sort of thinking over like, oh, that's kind of perfect.
Yeah.
And like I don't agree with Sorkin. I don't think the internet is this harbinger of doom. I think the harbinger of doom is us, and the internet is just a conduit for that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I think we're still waiting on someone to make the great movie about that, but
yeah. maybe I think any good fascism documentary is kind of because I do think what's happening. This is kind of an offset, but I do like what's happening with the internet right now is exactly what happened to fascism with fascism and radio, and also when it later happened, communism, TV, etc., etc. Like these mass media is just being abused, and this movie doesn't do any of that. But there's kind of the inkling of the new order is this thing to be reviled.
But to be fair, the movie's not about that. It's about a very different moment in history, and when this movie came out, even that had not really happened yet.
No, because Facebook was how old was Facebook when this came out?
6 years. This movie came out in 2010. This was 2 years after the 2008 election. 2012 was the first election that was really kind of
with proper social media.
Right, yeah, exactly.
The internet's been around since the early 90s. But as far as as we know, social media, YouTube, these giant corporate
how long had Twitter been around when this movie came out? Not that long. So So the movie was not made with enough of the historical context to have that sort of thing in there.
These are just things I'm reading onto it because it's all I can read onto things.
Understandably.
But I think that is something interesting, and that's where I do kind of think oh wow, that's kind of that is kind of I do agree with you. It can be an accidental masterpiece of time, these two minds which can left unrestrained just can be disastrous, sort of can make this great sort of combined vision, and that's really fascinating. And I don't think there's any movie out there that does that. In quite the same way.
All right. So just as a last thing to touch on, I just wanted to once again address what I think is the biggest kind of issue and controversy with this movie, which is the way that it treats women.
Yeah.
Now, here obviously this movie is about very misogynistic and characters who do not treat women well at all.
Yeah.
Also, obviously, Sorkin is not the best writer of female characters. We know this.
No, but he's also not the worst either. Let's put that on.
That is very true. Now, I do not want to lay... Here's my thing.
Yeah.
I don't think David Fincher has a women problem, really, at all. If you look at his other movies, there is no female objectification, really. I can't even think of a moment in, any of his other movies where there is, a major kind of objectification moment.
I don't think it's I don't think it's really objectification, straightforward objectification of women specifically. I think there's more this is the same guy who made Fight Club, and there was kind of a toxic masculinity that sort of pulses through a lot of his work.
Okay, yes, and
that is part of why I think that is part of why I get so riled up at his stuff.
All right, that is fair, and Fight Club is terrible, but Here's my thing. Again,
I'm not saying Fight Club is why we should hate the Social Network. I'm not saying that at all.
But if you look at the Social Network, yes, there are moments definitely where women are objectified. I completely admit that. However, they are scattered throughout the movie. The movie really does not have any substantial female characters. I grant you that. Yeah. But I do think every moment where there is an objectification on screen of a female figure or whatever, it is through the eyes of a character that is misogynistic. You have the party scene, which I watched that scene with the director's commentary and with the actor's commentary. Both Fincher and Andrew Garfield said this, so obviously this was something that was understood by the people making the movie. That party is meant to be this is Fincher's words, subjectively channeled through the people who were not invited. And Andrew Garfield says something you're not really sure if this is a real party or if this is just something that's happening inside of Mark's head. Yeah. It is a fantastical party sequence that is meant to show you what Mark Zuckerberg thinks he's missing out on, what the culture of this kind of community that he's trying to get into is like. And no, it's not realistic, although Fincher also says that, based on the research he did, he doesn't think it's too far off. But, so I can't speak to that, because I didn't do the research that he did, but, I don't know. I think that party sequence is definitely meant to be like a subjective version of a college party, and I don't think meant to be done with any kind of like, sense of realism. The other thing is that the other like major one is that scene that you pointed out, was that scene where we first meet Sean Parker. Okay, A, he just had sex with this girl. B, Sean Parker, again, horribly misogynistic person
he is too.
who
I
treats,
think they all are to a certain degree.
Who treats women just like objects. So, and this, having, a woman like, dressed like that, there's one shot where you're kind of like following her ass as she like walks toward the bathroom, which is a POV shot from Sean Parker's perspective. So I can forgive that. Lots of movies have something like that. Is it, 100%, okay, whatever. I don't want to get too far into the ethics of that. But that scene shows you what kind of person this is. It is incredible economy of storytelling that immediately establishes who this character is, what kind of person he is, what he does, and it is super effective. It gets all that across, like, just immediately. You get it. It's a very entertaining scene, like, not just because of this scantily clad woman. Like, the dialogue is very, like, kind of bantery and fun and interesting. And so that's that. And then the party scene at the end is just kind of meant to be, I think, just showing you, like, just, like, the spiral of, like, this character and this culture. So that, to me, is also, I think, justifiable. So...
yeah. In regards to, like, the opening, I'll kind of keep this to what I think of the opening scene. Okay. Let's see. Because, like, we have it so, like, and I'm pretty damn sure, like, after reading the script, I'm pretty damn sure it's kind of supposed to be, like, these, like, subjective, like, cutaways, or, like, we cut between, like, Zuckerberg at the computer and, like, these party scenes, like, as it's, like, this is, like, the, like, revenge-filled fantasies of a man who has been denied these pleasures.
Right.
I get that. The issue is that, like, and whether Fincher intended, and whether ever Fincher intended this kind of void from this, I don't think it's ever made clear enough that that's what it is. Like, it is honestly like I think this is where a point where, like, Fincher just needs, like, to either, like, up his style, or it just needs to up his style and go all out, because, like, it doesn't really feel like fantasy. It feels like everything else we've seen in the movie. Like, it's all shot very distant. There's no real filmmaking change from anything else. It feels like a kind of, like, back at the ranch, like, cutting between two different moments, and it doesn't feel like this is what's running through this kid's mind. It just feels like a straight cutaway. In, like, the way that it's shot, the way that it's edited, which is kind of like, it's not really, there's not anything, like, montage-like or experimental really about it. We kind of just cut to these places or, like, in between some moments. So, right. I get what you're saying. I just don't think the filmmaking really portrays that. And, like, whether that's, like, a directing thing or an editing thing, it's both. Like, that just doesn't land for me.
All right. I can understand that, and I will acknowledge that. That's fair. Again, fair criticism. Yeah. Again, why this movie's not perfect. I said this. So, yes,
don't worry, like, some of my favorite movies are deeply, deeply flawed, too.
Well, I'll acknowledge that. I just don't think it's 100% fair to, like, totally condemn the movie for, like, having misogynistic filmmaking when, the intention of it, was there, but it fell flat. I can definitely acknowledge that it was a failing of the movie, that it didn't go far enough with that, and so it failed to come across. I'll acknowledge that. However, I do think that intention keeps it from being able to, like, be completely labeled as a misogynistic movie, or, like, with having misogynistic filmmaking.
And yeah, and this is also, like, just a failure of my just sort of critical way of talking about things. I think I portrayed it too much as like this final, like, card fully condemning the movie, which I think it's a big problem with the movie, but I don't think it's like this, this movie can be chucked away into the bin with all the other misogynist pictures, like those damn Transformers pictures. I don't think that at all. I mean, this is... The fact that we're still talking about this movie shows, like, this has value. This is certainly something that will keep being in the lexicon, that should be in the lexicon.
All right,
so... And I fully support that. So, yeah, I think I just... Even though I think I was, like, reasonable enough in the last word, I do think, like, I am a bit more tame on this movie than I seem. Because everything that comes out of my mouth about movies I have trouble with seem like damning with fine praise.
All right, so I think we've reached a point of, just kind of, we disagree on certain points of this movie. We certainly both acknowledge that it's worthwhile. It's still
Some scenes are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So, well, if I got you to acknowledge that, then I will chalk this up as something of a success on my part.
Something of a success. Well, I already thought, like, some scenes were utterly brilliant even before I talked to you. Like the party scene and the tilt shift stuff.
Yeah.
And even, like, I think the funniest scene in the movie is, like, them like, hang gliding, or not hang gliding,
ziplining.
They build, like, a little zip line.
Yeah.
Off the brick chimney, and it just bursts, and they just land in the pool, and they're like, "Are you all right?" Okay.
Yeah.
And also the utter dismissal like they have for interns is kind of funny in how cool they are.
All right.
So regardless, I don't think this is like a failure of a movie. It's a movie made. It's a movie made like by one person I deeply hate and another person who has issues.
Okay.
And I think, like, the
fair.
result of that is both, like, a failure and a fascinating accidental masterpiece.
Well, I think it's just a fascinating accidental masterpiece, but there it is. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree on that, and that's fine. And it's still my favorite movie, so take that for whatever it's worth.
Oh, yeah. I do want to talk about Steve Jobs some. Like, where are you, like, on this movie? Like, because, like, both of these movies, like, share, like, the core, like, man creates miraculous technology based on, like, infantile ego.
Well, I had highly unreasonable expectations going into Steve Jobs because The Social Network is my favorite movie of all time. And it was unreasonable to expect it to be as good. That being said, there are some major structural issues with Steve Jobs that I have a hard time getting past. I do think the first and second, like, sequences work pretty well. I think the third one...
When we get to that third act, it just starts to become repetitive.
Yeah,
and
the third one is just, I think, a bridge too far. And
yeah, and, like, I don't mind that, like, Sorkin keyed in to the daughter. I think that is something about this character that I think, like, Sorkin really cares about it, and if he really cares about it, like, make the movie about it.
I don't have a problem with that in theory. That's an interesting, like, facet of this man to latch onto. The problem is, I think Sorkin so focuses on that at the expense of everything else about this character.
Yeah, it is something that, like, sucks out, like, everything else. And,
yeah.
Like, it just becomes, like, everything about this man hinges on whether he gives his daughter an iPod.
Right. It also, I think, that, I don't know whether it was just that is the reason for this, but Sorkin is way less clear-eyed about Steve Jobs as a character than he was about Mark Zuckerberg, and that is a big problem, because Jobs then just turns into one of Sorkin's typical, like... Idealistic, like...
Misunderstood.
Powerful, like, male character just kind of lording over the movie, and that's a big problem, and the ending is just so tone-deaf. Where Woz storms out, and, like, he has a fight with his daughter and everything, but then at the end, like, he goes on stage, and he basks in the applause, and Woz comes back in. Half of my problems with the ending would be solved if Woz did not come back in. But Woz comes back in! And that is a huge problem!
Oh, I get it. Like, that ending is a train wreck. Like, that
it's
ending
like
is
the music swells and he's basking in applause. Like, it could have been like a Mark Zuckerberg type, like
turtleneck and little
like
glasses.
look, it could have been an echo of the ending of The Social Network. Like, if you have like Jobs like alone on stage, like basking in this glory, but kind of wondering like how fulfilling it actually is. Like, that could have been very profound. But no, it's like the music swells and everybody comes back in and just kind of looks at him, and it's like, oh no, Steve Jobs, like, you were all right in the end. And
no, it's like the ending of The Social Network, just like blown up to 11. Because like in The Social Network, it's kind of like well, deep down, I don't think you're quite the dick shit that you are. In Steve Jobs, it's, oh, you are absolved. He has given his daughter an iPod.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but I am not gonna lie. I do enjoy. I would much rather watch Steve Jobs and The Social Network purely on the case of like Danny Boyle is just a far better directorial presence. Like, he elevates material.
All right. Well. Agree to disagree, because I don't think Danny Boyle adds a ton to the material, but I do like his kind of aesthetic thing of like shooting it in like 3 different formats, like one's on 16, one's on 35, one's on digital. That's all cool. I don't know. I just
colors are just so. We kind of go into like modern Spielberg blown out windows for the end, which is kind of weird. But like,
yeah, well,
I still think that's like. That's far more than Fincher ever gives things.
I don't know. The difference between you and me is I fixate a lot more on like the screenwriting and like the kind of nitty gritty like nuts and bolts of storytelling than you do, which is fine. That's part of what like makes the podcast so fun.
I'm far too like distracted by like great ideas and visuals, and Steve Jobs gives me both.
Okay, and that's fine. I just, like I say, that's what makes the podcast so fun, or at least part of it is that our different perspectives on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's all good. I just the storytelling and the screenplay of that movie to me is just so lackluster that I will probably rarely pick it up again.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I just think that like that movie is like 2 acts of like transcendent film, and then the 3rd act starts, and then like.
Well, to me, it's 2 acts of like really pretty good film, and then the 3rd act is a train wreck. So
yeah,
I don't know.
There are train wreck moments in it. Like, believe me, like while it's coming back is like him basking in the sun. Like, totally agree. That ending is a wreck, and just like all of Sorkin's like Sorkinisms just coming back in the worst way.
Yeah. I don't know, but that's Steve Jobs. So, all right.
I just wanted to talk about it.
Okay, that's a good button on this, I think. So. All right, thank you everybody for joining us for the re-litigation of The Social Network, and hope to see you all back next time or before time when we talk about the 3 Colors trilogy. I'm not sure exactly when I'll get this up, but we'll see. This ended up being longer than some of our regular episodes, so.
I thought that would happen because like we are both just so passionate about like this is your favorite movie, and I will do anything to like. Sort of like lay out my issues with Fincher and like because I always feel like I'm trying to like absolve myself for like the vitriol I laid out last year. I just want like a coherent like blueprint of why I hate this director.
Well, if it's any consolation, this is the closest you've come so far. So
what the fuck is he making next? Does anyone know?
I think he's making the sequel to World War Z. I think that's what I heard. That's fine. That's good material for him. He'll bring like kind of a style to it, and that's fine.
When's the last time? When's the last time he's done like a major action scene?
I don't know. Maybe The Game.
I haven't seen The Game.
I'm really heavily debating whether to recommend The Game to you because it's kind of just a fun, like, Twilight Zonian, like, premise that just kind of runs amok through an entire movie. And I don't know. Maybe you'll just hate it. I don't know. But
well, is it like does it have like all like the same like stale monolithic filmmaking that all of his stuff has?
I think it's a little bit looser. It's earlier in his career. Maybe you'll disagree with me. I really don't know. So watch it if you feel like it, but don't hold me responsible if you hate it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Like, it's been a while since I've seen Seven, and I still do think that like Seven is like an all right time. But I think like all the things people read into it are just like nothing but like hollow set dressing.
Yeah. I don't think that movie is like terribly profound or anything. I just think it's a pretty entertaining like crime thriller.
Yeah, it's an all right crime thriller with like it's Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt bonding. Aww. Though, like, I will say, like, that movie does have, like, one of the better, like, that is, like, the one moment where I'm like, okay, every frame of painting, you get this. Where, like, he, like, looks at, like, how, like, John Doe is shot on a tripod, and Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt are more handheld to sort of, like, designate, like, who has the power in that scene. Like, I think maybe that is why I'm also, like, so angry. I think my hatred of him is multifaceted, because I see, like, there are transcendent moments, and, like, he could be, like, the auteur of the 21st century.
He's overrated for sure, but ultimately, I don't know. I just don't have as much of an issue with him as you do, so it's... I don't know.
I think things just get on my chrome. I think there was like this gut sort of like reactionary thing in me that like I actually don't believe I'm like a very angry person. I think I've mellowed out quite a bit.
That is true.
I think I've mellowed out quite a bit, but like there are still like sometimes I just go like I want to punch this, or like this is like an offend. I never actually say like this offends me, because like nothing can offend me. I guess like the only thing that can offend me is bad. Like that's it. Like I remember like usually like when I watch bad movies now, it's kind of just like, oh my. I just kind of just turn into a grandma, and I'm just like, oh, I'm just more shocked by what I'm watching than anything else. Like that's the emotion that comes. I'm like, oh, who thought this was a good idea? Oh no.
All right. Anyway, join us next time or whenever for Kieslowski movies, and thanks for joining us. All right, goodbye.
Well, granted, there is a Guy Ritchie movie where Ray Liotta does a lot of screaming, so
oh boy,
it's usually regarded as Guy Ritchie's worst movie, but regardless.
What movie is that?
Revolver.
Wow, I've never heard of it.
It's I don't want to say infamous, because infamous implies it has a sort of popularity behind it. It is interesting. Oh. Put it that way.
Goody.
Interesting.